Good day, mates. My name is Mordecai, and welcome back to the show, where a relatively inexperienced role-player narrates various RPG-related stories as a learning tool. As part of playing role-playing games, and especially tabletop role-playing games, quite often we can become attached to the character we're playing as or with, taking risks, having an engaging plot, and related developments, and rolling dice to find out what happens in the world. Additionally, as a player and a character, you learn about the world as well, and that can result in the same kind of attachment. Such an attachment to a character is perfectly fine, and under most circumstances isn't a problem. But what about when a player gets too attached to the character as they are, or perhaps worse, desires to make their character, quote, perfect, unquote? This can often lead to the creation of a Mary Sue, sometimes called a Gary Stew, but we'll use the term that's coined more often for clarity. A Mary Sue is a term used to refer to a character which is supposedly absolutely flawless, a perfect individual who gets all of the glam and never fails to achieve anything they set their mind on. And that's exactly the problem with the Mary Sue trope. Its stagnancy often results in the creation of characters that are innately apathetic. Arguably worse than apathetic, since these characters effectively drain the environment in which they exist. However, before we formally begin with the narration, I have to give a strong disclaimer. Today's video includes a discussion on the topic of autism, purely for educational purposes and purely from the perspective of someone who is on the spectrum. Thus, the talk about autism is not from the perspective of a trained psychologist. If you or any other viewer wish to learn more about autism, seek out qualified professional sources for further information. Yeah, this story isn't for the light-hearted. Before we get started with the narration, if you like my content and want to see more of it, be sure to subscribe and like the video. It's free, and you can always change your mind later. Enjoy! Let's delve into the often terrifying world of RPG horror stories. Today's story is titled, Mary Sue Player Throws Tantrum When My Character Refuses to Be Her Best Friend After She Almost Gets Her and Her Young Daughter Murdered, and is written by Consort Wisdom. Hi guys, this is my first post here. Sorry for the length. The cast consists of me, myself, the original poster, which consists of me and my character, FP, and Mary Sue / Mary Sue's player, the problem player and her self-insert. The context for the story. Mary Sue's player was the star of the server. Her character, which was just her in real life but with fox ears and a fox tail, was front and center in every roleplay, getting loads of in-game attention and getting nothing but praise from her friends, consisting of the server's moderators. The NPCs, who were played by the moderators, who were also the server's dungeon masters, even lessened their brutal behavior towards her, giving her more grace for failed rolls. It didn't help that she was a good girl with a good heart that believed in the goodness of everyone, despite idolizing a villain known across kingdoms for his crimes all of her life, ever since she burnt down her orphanage at the age of 4 and was thrown out to live on the streets until 18. She even had a special ability where she couldn't die, but would instead respawn with roll disadvantages in-game for a week. No one else got the chance at an ability even remotely close to this. Mary Sue's player, it should be noted, has autism, and this is part of the reason why she was given so much leniency. This would be fine if the server moderators didn't exclusively give her these privileges, but when a lower functioning player new to roleplay wouldn't understand anything, they would jump down that player's case like a bat out of hell. The server never had permanent new members, with people popping in and usually leaving within a few weeks. I joined it at what was considered a height in people joining, but one by one, all of the people that joined began to leave, with me as the exception. I asked other players at the time of everything happening, and a good few expressed annoyance that Mary Sue was getting gobs and gobs of attention just because she was friends with all of the moderators. They didn't want to bring it up, however, because they knew that the moderators would come down on them with the wrath of God, as they often had in the past with anyone who critiqued the server in any meaningful capacity. Mary Sue's character, over the course of 2 years, was constantly reset and edited and changed if anyone thought negatively of her precious self-insert. And one of the moderators of the server even told me that she loves causing chaos, especially when she's the center of it. But they never really corrected it until after all of this drama started. It was one of the server's many problems. The horror story itself. After Mary Sue's player constantly begged, pestered, and bugged me about it, I finally decided it was time for my character's big arc of roleplay. She was heavily insistent that the roleplay happen as soon as possible, despite me wanting to pushing it off, because of mounting real-life stress. She had forced the lore point of the daughter out of me, after hassling me non-stop about why my character was the way that she was. For context, my character is a former princess, exiled from her kingdom, and the party was going to steal back her young daughter from her ex-husband, the now king of the realm. We lived in an airship, so this wouldn't really halt anything. This was my chance to show why my character was the haughty individual that she was, and to give an opening for her to begin to warm up to the other players. Previously, after the constant nagging and bugging, FP had confided in Mary Sue that she missed her darling daughter and wanted her back, but was fearful of what their boss, a well-known crime lord across the various kingdoms, would think. So she was sworn to secrecy of the daughter's origins until the right time. After the big fight with the king's forces and escaping the king, the party was in the airship, with FP holding her dear daughter close, reunited after being separated for far too long. And then, from the backseat comes the shrill cry, "I told you we'd get your daughter back!" Oh my god, I was going to scream. You, a very angry crime lord, having to be quickly persuaded not to throw my character and her daughter off the ship, and FP having a very deep resentment for Mary Sue. Mary Sue's player tolerated this for only a week before she began directly messaging me, asking why my character was still mad at hers, and pestering me about how they should be friends by now, and couldn't my character just move on already? I calmly but firmly told her that she had betrayed my character at the deepest personal level, and it was going to take a considerable length of time for them to regain that trust. But I assured her that I wouldn't have FP bully Mary Sue, and that this would be a cold shoulder treatment instead. We discussed a few methods for this to go through, including a friendly rivalry, where each tried to better themselves to outdo the other in a civilized manner. However, whenever I tried the harmless pranks that we agreed on in a test roleplay, her character would sigh and wail and pout like a great damsel about how much of a bully FP was, despite her player agreeing to keep it as a friendly, mutual rivalry, where they would not trash talk to each other. I kept refusing and denying her further requests, since after more attempts like this, she continued the exact same behaviour. And then came MSP's second idea. Mary Sue's player concocted a wild, crackpot idea wherein my character would strip everything from Mary Sue, break her down mentally, steal everything she loved, then at the last second, revert to become friends. I firmly declined, but she continued bothering me and pestering me about it. They tried a sort of intervention roleplay where the two characters sat down to talk, but Mary Sue began listing ways about how FP was an attention-stealing bully who did nothing but belittle and bully her and all these horrible things when I just wanted to be friends. FP snapped at her that what she was saying was a crock of complete, absolute, arbitrary nonsense, and that she almost got her and her daughter killed. So why would she ever want to be friends with her? It ended rather sourly, with it finally getting into Mary Sue's head that my character wasn't going to bow down before her. The aftermath of the story, Mary Sue's player eventually broke down and ran to the character development channel, sobbing her heart out about redoing her character entirely, backstory and all, because she felt like her character was awful and nobody likes her. The moderators, for the first time, after 2 entire years, told her that she couldn't just reset her character every time she did something wrong. This would massively affect many arcs, and they weren't going to rewrite everything just because a character did something wrong. There never was a real resolution. Because of other issues in the server and its various dramas, I was at the point where I was breaking down into tears during calls with friends, having panic attacks where I was incoherently mumbling and shaking whilst hyperventilating, and eventually my patience just hit rock bottom. I never freaked out on her MTV style, but I stopped being polite when Mary Sue would have tantrums about not getting a certain item that my character had. I have other stories about how bad this server is, if anyone's interested after reading this. That would be the end of the story, but the post also has a small editor's note. I see people asking why I stayed in the server when it was clearly so horrible. At the time, I was in a very bad mental state that was rapidly declining in quality, and the few words of praise from the mods had me torn violently between this is all wrong and what if I'm so narcissistic that I manipulated myself into thinking I'm the victim? I must be a horrible person. All I really wanted was for someone to care about me, even if it came from such a toxic place. And that's the end of the story. With all of the problems that the Mary Sue was causing, both in-game and out, there's a lot to break down with this story. So we will start with the autism, since it was mentioned in brief at the start. Bear in mind that a lot of the information I am about to discuss is from my own personal experience, and not from the perspective of a qualified professional. Some of what I have to say may not apply at all to anyone's particular situation. At the start of the video, I mentioned that I am on the spectrum for autism, and I fully admit that it can have a profound impact on how I interact with the world. Sometimes autism is referred to as being under one or possibly multiple medically correct but still potentially derogatory classifications. Phrases like neurological disorder or mental disability are sometimes used, and they can make the particular individual feel like they're not welcome in society. However, with the right support, a person who is on the spectrum can lead a life where they contribute positively, are seen as talented, hardworking individuals that society values. And that right support is something that society today is fully capable of providing, and frequently does. However, at a certain point, a person's behavior is not the result of being on the spectrum, but instead a product of who that person is. When a person is using autism as an excuse for bad behavior, everyone suffers. Plus, we can all agree that Mary Sue is not in an environment that's providing the right kind of support. Not by a long shot. Being in an environment where every whim is catered to is not an environment that is going to help the particular person acquire the skill set needed later in life. And I fully agree with the original poster for taking a stand, since that could eventually lead to Mary Sue learning those vital skills. Perhaps not from the server in question, but perhaps when the server moderators realize that allowing Mary Sue to manipulate as she pleases will do Mary Sue more harm in the long run. Because, let's face it, without the permanency of death, character growth, or flaws, what is the point of role-playing the character? You may as well just write a book. There's also other lessons for a new role-player to learn from Mary Sue. Being the center of attention is not the be-all and end-all of role-playing. Playing a side character can be its own brand of fun. We all love reading about Sherlock Holmes, but I honestly find Dr. Watson to be the more memorable character myself, and a big part of that is that Dr. Watson shares the spotlight with Sherlock Holmes. And perhaps the most important advice I can give to a new player, as a new player, from this story, is that the character should be allowed to grow alongside the story. People, like characters, make mistakes, and it is often said that the greatest teacher is the ability to make mistakes and learn from them. Perhaps the biggest mistake that was made in this entire story was by the Mary Sue, by having a character that effectively can't die, is reset upon making any mistakes, and being allowed to pressure other players into being best friends with a character that no one wants to hang around as a result of the character's actions. I sincerely hope that the original poster has since found a much better server or group for playing with, one that can provide the support that they need, especially during a time of mental crisis. And I also hope that they have since recovered from the aftermath of this horror story. And as an inexperienced player, these are some of the lessons I walk away from the story with. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It's free to do, and you can change your mind later. If you have any thoughts on this story or feedback on how it can improve, feel free to leave a comment. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.